Hello and welcome to another episode of Gary's Classic Cars, Singer Chamois Restoration. As you can see now, it's back on its wheels after having all the near side prepped and first time out of the garage for quite a few weeks. The next section to tackle is the offside, the rear quarter with the corrosion as you can see, front of the front wings and also the sills. So firstly I started by stripping the scuttle panel down, get all the paint off, see if there are any corrosion along with the front panel. This was in reasonably good condition with just slight corrosion on the bottom half. The spur wheel well was really good, however the wing on further investigation was quite a bit corroded. Suspension came off to give better access because I struggled a little bit on the near side. Then I started to clean all the underseal off the inner wheel arch, which is in good condition with a bit of surface rust, and at least the suspension turret on the top section was a lot better than the passenger side. Underneath was also very good. Stripped all the underseal off, mammoth task. There was a little bit of damage to the front wing, so I cut the section out and got a replacement. And I thought I would graft this in, making it a better job and the headlamp to fit a lot better, as you can see. All but welded in. I had to start to repair the inner arch. Again, fabricated some sections out of sheet steel in my bench with my vise, tacked them all in. Had to repair the front corner. That was a bit difficult because there's a few curves on that. Cleaned the bulkhead up and etch primed it, and then primed it with the red primer to prevent any further corrosion. Really moving on now, managed to get the inner boot all primed. Cleaned the wheel arch off of the surface rust best I could. Treated it. Then I realised there was a little bit of corrosion on the side of the scuttle, so cut that out and grafted in a new section. These things you find when you're doing restoration. Next part was remove the sill. Again, more corrosion, not as bad as the passenger side, but hey ho, still needs to be done. Cleaned it all off, the corrosion with the grinder, and then fabricated a new replacement centre membrane as I did with the opposite side. Saved buying one. Welded that on and then offered the sill up for checking. Again, make sure the door's on to check your gaps. Once you're happy, spot weld it on, recheck it again, and then fully weld it on. The corrosion on the floor wasn't as bad as on this side, so I only had a smaller section to make and graft in, so it was a lot easier doing it the second time round. The rear arch, however, had an arch on previously by a previous owner on top of the old arch. Some of it was okay, so I left it on and just grafted up a new section on where required. Didn't cut the back off yet. I was concentrating on the front and working towards the rear, so I went back to the front wing and did the same repair section as I did on the other side. Fabricated it by hand rather than by a full wheel arch. Bit tricky, but with a bit of filler to get the shape back, it all came together. Also had to do a bit of repair on the inner arch just below the door hinge fitment. This picture is of first coat of primer. You can see where it's soaked into the filler a little bit. Then the second coat covered much better, along with the inner wheel arch all cleaned up and primed. Moving on to the rear, where the spring sits in, there was quite a bit of corrosion, so I ended up cutting all that out and fabricating some new sections in. Didn't want the spring to come through the bulkhead, which normally does on these Hillman Imps. Again, there's a cover around that, which I fabricated again in a cone shape and welded that on. As I did with the other side, I fabricated the sill extension and welded that in, and I also fabricated the wheel arch. If you notice, I've actually stepped the panel in rather than the wheel arch so that any dampness runs over the top and not in the joint, as most other people tend to not do. Offered the offside rear corner section up ready for cutting. Finally welded it all together, bit of filler on it, although there does look a lot. Flatted it down. That was the first coat of primer, just to see what it looked like. Then I flatted it all off, added a little bit more filler to get the shape back, and then re-primed again. I think probably one of the only parts I hadn't had to repair was the boot. It was in really good, the engine lid was in really good condition with just surface rust, so I ended up cleaning all that off and trial fitted it and primed it to make sure all the gaps matched. The next stage was real move on, was stone chip the rear parcel shelf and the floor pans in the centres, ready for preparation for paint. Then I managed to primer the engine or the boot bay at the front and all the internals of the car. Felt like I was moving forwards leaps and bounds at this stage. The shell was finally in primer and prepped, ready for painting of the white stripe. Also managed to repair the bonnet, which you'll see in the previous video, and the boot lid now are in primer, ready to go back on the vehicle. Did a bit of a guide coat, found a few little marks, so filled them in with some prime primer filler, and then ended up painting the white stripe on in the original polar white as per the factory. This got masked off during the colour on. At last, colour, you can actually see what the forest green looks like rather than in the tin. All the floor repainted, along with the engine bay, both sides, all the rear bulkhead and all the floor pans. What looked most impressive was the wheel arches. They were stone chipped and all body colour, and they've really stayed well over the years it's been done. But I do keep regularly cleaning on it. Hope you like it so far, and there's more to come.